Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about the top 6 things that you can do to ace that technical interview. Hi everyone, I'm Sahana and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to tell you a little bit more about interviewing today. I've done my share of interviews and I've conducted hundreds of interviews that are both technical and non-technical. I'm excited to share with you some of my favorite tips for technical interviews. Number 1, sell your story. Help your interviewer get to know you and feel an emotional connection to you. Touch on all the decisions that you've made that have shaped who you are and have brought you to this spot. And also share with them why their company is the obvious next choice for you. Reframe everything in a positive light. You might say something like, Company X ended up shutting down unfortunately while I was there, but I got to work with such a high caliber team and I really picked up a ton of tools and skills that helped me get my next gig. My biggest advice here, practice telling your story in front of a mirror, practice saying it with confidence, and practice saying it in a way that feels true to who you are and showcases all your amazing qualities. Tip number 2, process over correctness. Now I know as soon as you hear the problem from the interviewer, you're going to want to jump into figuring out the best, most correct solution you possibly can. That's what they're looking for, right? Well, actually, most interviewers are trying to understand how you think. So the best thing you can do when you first hear that question is actually to repeat the question and make sure you understand it. Make sure that you ask all the questions that you possibly can think of. Think of all those edge cases and really get a holistic understanding of what the interviewer is asking. Not only does this buy you time, but it helps you make sure that when it's time to solve the problem, you have all the information you need. Your interviewer wants to know how you think systematically, so go into the problem with some process. Say something like, all right, let me make sure I understood the problem correctly. And then ask follow-up questions about all the edge cases. Tip number 3, talk about the wrong answers. Most interview questions are meant to be vague and open-ended. This gives candidates some room to explore possible solutions and talk about trade-offs. So as you're thinking about a problem, think about all the possible solutions you could take. Even the most naive solution is worth mentioning. Why? Because it gives the interviewer some insight into how you think and why you think that solution is a bad solution. That's some knowledge that you have that you should totally share. So when solving a problem, you could say, all right, this is the solution that seems to be the most naive, and here are the reasons why I feel like it might not be the best solution, though it is definitely the first one that comes to mind. The second solution feels a lot better, but here's another thing that I'm a little bit concerned about. Maybe it's speed, maybe it's ease of access of the data. And here's the last solution. Maybe it's a little bit more complex, but I do think it could be more performant. Chances are you're already thinking about it this way. The most important thing though is to voice exactly your thought process. The worst thing that can happen here is for there to be dead air. You don't want that. So make sure you talk about all the possible solutions and mention trade-offs even before the interviewer asks. Tip number 4. Let's call this one, I don't know, but chances are your interviewer is going to ask you something that you don't know the answer to. Maybe you've heard of it before, but it's maybe not something you're very comfortable talking about. Here's what you could say. Well, I'm not too familiar with X, but here's what I do know. And then go ahead and list everything that you know. Just spill it all out there. And your interviewer will guide you and say, yes, exactly, or not quite, here's what it is. Another thing you could do if you've never heard of what they're talking about is just openly say, hey, actually, I'm not too familiar with what you're talking about. Do you mind telling me a little bit more? There's nothing wrong with not knowing about something. There's so much content out there that we as engineers are expected to know, and no interviewer will expect you to know absolutely everything. So be confident in saying, I don't know, and tell the interviewer what you do know. Tip number 5, check in with your interviewer. There's going to be times in an interview when you aren't sure which way to go. Should you dive into this part of the problem or this other one? My best piece of advice here is to just ask the interviewer. Check in with them at different points in the interview and ask them, does this look okay? Or do you want me to dig into this a little further? One thing I like to do in coding interviews is to either write pseudocode first, or if I'm writing the code, write helper functions that I don't quite implement just yet. Then I can ask my interviewer, hey, let me know which of these helper functions you want me to dig further into. That way they can be really clear about which ones they want you to work on first and which is the highest priority for them to get signal from you. Last and final tip, number 6, add context to your questions. At the end of the interview, you'll have a chance to ask the interviewer some questions. This is your chance to keep showcasing a little bit more about yourself. Show them that you've researched the company and that you have really great values that align really well with the company. Here's some examples that I really like to use. I read about your company's values on your blog, and I could really get behind them. I'm curious, how do you live by those values in your work day to day? Or you could say something like, I'm early in my career and I'm looking for opportunities to grow. I believe feedback is a huge part of that. What is your process around feedback at your company? What's great about these questions is that you're giving your interviewer just a little bit more information about who you are and what matters to you. Remember, this is your chance to really get to know if this company is the right fit for you. So prepare for these questions and make sure they are custom to each company. Hopefully that was helpful. Remember, just come off as confident as best as you can, and you are gonna do a great job. I believe in you. Let me know if you have any questions by asking them in the comments below, and let me know how your interviews go. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.